After a decade on the force, I thought I had seen it all. I'd faced criminals, drug dealers, and even a few murderers. But nothing could prepare me for what awaited me in Poland, a dark web of exploitation and the twisted secrets that came with it. My name is Sarah Miller, and this is my story. I had resigned from my position as a police officer, disillusioned by the bureaucracy and the ineffectiveness of the system. As a private investigator, I believed I could make a real difference, helping families in distress. That's how I found myself knee-deep in a missing persons case involving a young woman named Anya Kowalski. Her parents were frantic, convinced she had fallen victim to something sinister. As I began my investigation, I felt the familiar thrill of the chase and the weight of responsibility. Anya had vanished 2 weeks earlier, last seen leaving her part-time job at a local cafe. As I dug deeper, I discovered that she wasn't the first woman to disappear from the area. I found reports of similar cases, each one hinting at a possible connection. Every time I combed through old files and police reports, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was onto something big. I began by interviewing Anya's friends and coworkers. Most were tight-lipped, but one barista, a nervous young woman named Clara, finally broke down. "I overheard her talking about meeting someone online," she whispered, glancing around the cafe. "She thought he was a model or something. He wanted her to do a photo shoot. She seemed excited, but I don't know. It felt off." I asked Clara for more details, and she reluctantly shared the username Anya had mentioned. Dreamchaser88. It sounded harmless enough, but my instincts told me otherwise. I took the name back to my cramped office and began my research, which led me to a dark corner of the internet, a marketplace where vulnerable women were exploited under the guise of modeling gigs. As I navigated through the murky waters of the dark web, I found a forum filled with chilling accounts from other women who had fallen prey to similar schemes. Each story recounted how they were lured by promises of fame and fortune, only to be met with threats and coercion. It was a modern-day slave trade, and Anya's name appeared more than once. My stomach twisted as I realized she could be one of their victims. I contacted a few tech-savvy friends who could help me gather more intel on the forum. They helped me track the IP addresses of some users, and I discovered that several had originated from an abandoned building on the outskirts of Krakow. The very thought sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to act quickly, but I was also painfully aware that I was treading into dangerous territory. As I continued to dig deeper, I received threatening messages warning me to stop. At first, I brushed them off. I was used to intimidation tactics from my years on the force, but soon it became clear that these threats were different, more serious and personal. One message read, "Stay out of matters that don't concern you. Or else." But I couldn't turn back. Anya's family deserved answers, and I owed it to her to find out what had happened. I arranged a visit to the abandoned building, armed with a hidden camera and a desperate resolve. As I entered, a foul odor hit me, and I quickly realized that this place had seen better days, if it ever had any. Broken furniture and debris cluttered the floor, and an unsettling silence engulfed the space. My heart raced as I wandered through the dimly lit rooms, recording everything on my camera. Then, in one of the back rooms, I stumbled upon what looked like a makeshift studio, a camera set up, lighting equipment, and a small mirror. The walls were adorned with posters of women, some of whom I recognized from the online forum. And then I heard it, muffled voices from the adjacent room. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. Peering through a crack in the door, I saw a group of men huddled around a computer screen, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow. They were discussing the next model, like they were planning a business meeting. Suddenly, I realized I was in over my head. They were orchestrating something far more sinister than I had anticipated. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but curiosity pulled me closer. I needed proof. That's when I noticed a figure tied to a chair in the corner, a woman who resembled Anya. My breath caught in my throat. I mustered the courage to push the door open, but before I could even step inside, a hand grabbed me from behind. A man pulled me into a darkened corner, his grip like iron. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his eyes narrowing. Panic surged through me. I'm looking for Anya. I know she's here. He laughed, a harsh, menacing sound. You should have stayed away. Now you'll join her. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I elbowed him hard in the stomach, breaking free from his grip. I bolted back toward the exit, the sounds of chaos erupting behind me. The men shouted, realizing I was escaping. I sprinted through the building, heart pounding, barely glancing back. Once outside, I jumped into my car, shaking with fear and adrenaline. I had enough evidence to blow this operation wide open, but I also knew that I was a target now. I quickly called the local authorities, detailing everything I had witnessed, and made sure to send them the footage from my hidden camera. The police took my report seriously, launching a raid on the building just hours after my escape. They found the women trapped inside and arrested several men involved in the trafficking ring. However, my victory was short-lived. The men I encountered were part of a larger network, and the repercussions of my investigation haunted me. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself looking over my shoulder at every turn. The messages didn't stop, they only intensified. You think you can expose us? We'll find you. I had put myself in the crosshairs of a dangerous game, and the weight of that decision bore down on me. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I heard a knock at the door. My heart raced. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. I didn't recognize the figure standing there. Panic gripped me, and I backed away from the door. Who is it? I called out, my voice shaky. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Then, a low, chilling voice responded. You should have kept your nose out of our business. I didn't wait for another word. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my heart pounding in my chest. As I backed away from the door, I heard the sound of something heavy hitting the floor outside, an ominous thud that echoed in my mind. I felt trapped, like prey in a hunter's sight. The police arrived, but by the time they got there, the figure had vanished. They found no trace of the intruder, just an unsettling message left behind on my doorstep. Next time, you won't be so lucky. Though I helped rescue those women and exposed a significant operation, I still felt a sense of dread lingering in my life. I moved cities, changed my phone number, and did everything I could to disappear. But I knew the dark web had a long reach, and as long as I was alive, I would carry the scars of what I had uncovered. Now, every time I take on a case, I'm reminded of that fateful investigation in Poland. The darkness I encountered is real and alive, and it reminds me that sometimes, the worst dangers lie hidden just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The world may be full of beauty, but it's also rife with horror, waiting to ensnare the unsuspecting. I had always considered myself tech-savvy, the kind of person who could navigate the internet's darkest corners without getting caught. But there was one night that would change my perspective forever. The usual curiosity that had led me to explore subreddits and forums devolved into an experience that would haunt me for the rest of my life. It started innocently enough. I was browsing a chat forum when a thread titled, "The Hidden Room," caught my eye. The initial post was vague, speaking of a secret video chat room where participants could pay to watch real-time torture. I thought it was just a sick joke or an urban legend, something meant to stir outrage and curiosity. But my interest was piqued, and I clicked on the link provided, an impulsive decision I would come to regret. The moment I entered the chat room, a chill ran down my spine. The interface was basic, but the live feed displayed was anything but. A dimly lit room filled with shadowy figures surrounded a bound victim, their muffled screams echoing through my headphones. My heart raced as I watched, both horrified and transfixed. I told myself it was fake, just another poorly produced snuff film meant to shock viewers. But then something changed. A chat window popped up with a message from an anonymous user. "You shouldn't be here." I dismissed it as another sick joke, a way to instill fear in viewers. I was still processing the gruesome scene when the operators of the chat room began to engage with the audience, asking if anyone wanted to see more. My stomach turned as they twisted the knife deeper, literally, in front of the camera. Blood sprayed across the screen, soaking into the victim's clothes as the laughter of the operators filled the air. I felt a sense of dread wash over me, but part of me was still curious. I thought, what if this is a hoax? What if it's all staged? But deep down, I knew I was witnessing something horrific. The chat room had become a virtual torture chamber, and I was an unwilling spectator. Suddenly, the chat room began to fill with other users, all eager to see what the operators would do next. Comments flew by in rapid succession, people egging on the torture, some claiming they'd pay more to see worse. I could hardly breathe, overwhelmed by the depravity of what I was witnessing. As I sat there, transfixed, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I should leave, I thought. But just as I was about to close the window, the screen flickered. A message popped up from the same anonymous user. "You can't leave now. You're one of us." My heart dropped as I frantically tried to exit the chat room. Panic set in, and I quickly shut my laptop. But it was too late. My phone buzzed with a notification. An unknown number had sent me a text. "We know you're watching." My blood ran cold. I had heard about people getting doxxed, but this felt different. This was personal. I spent the next few days in a paranoid haze, looking over my shoulder every time I left the house. Every sound outside my window made my heart race. I turned off all my devices, convinced that the operators would find me if I left any digital footprints. I stopped going out and isolated myself in my apartment, drowning in anxiety. Then, late one night, my worst fears came true. I heard a knock at my door. My heart raced as I tiptoed to the peephole. A figure stood in the shadows, too dark to make out clearly. My mind raced with thoughts. Could it be someone from that chat room? My breath quickened as I backed away from the door. The knocking continued, louder this time, followed by a voice. "We know you're in there. Let's play a game." The chilling words sent shivers down my spine. I dialed 911, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I whispered my situation, trying to explain without alerting whoever was outside. Moments later, I heard them. The sound of a crowbar scraping against the door sent me into a panic. I backed away, stumbling into my kitchen, desperate for a way out. Just as I grabbed a knife for protection, I heard the door crash open. My heart pounded in my ears as I prepared to fight for my life. The figure stepped into my apartment, silhouetted against the hallway light. I raised the knife, trembling. But as the figure approached, I realized it wasn't a monster. It was a man, dressed in black, his face obscured by a mask. "You should have never watched," he said, his voice dripping with malice. In that moment, every fear I had felt before coalesced into pure terror. I lunged forward, stabbing at him, but he easily dodged my attempt. The adrenaline surged through me as I fought desperately, a primal instinct to survive kicking in. We grappled, and he pushed me to the ground. As I struggled, I could see the cold glint of a knife in his hand. "You wanted to see real horror?" he sneered, his eyes wide with twisted excitement. With a sudden surge of strength, I kicked him away, scrambling to my feet. I dashed toward the kitchen, searching for something to defend myself with. I could hear him getting back up behind me, the sound of his footsteps closing in. I grabbed a heavy frying pan and swung it at him just as he lunged. The pan connected with a sickening thud, and he fell to the ground, momentarily stunned. I bolted for the door, flinging it open and running into the hallway, my heart racing. I needed to get out to escape. I ran down the stairs, praying that I could reach safety before he recovered. I burst out of the building into the cold night air, my lungs gasping for breath. I didn't stop running until I reached the street, my mind racing with fear and disbelief. I called the police as I stumbled away from my apartment, desperately trying to make sense of what had just happened. When the officers arrived, I was trembling, my hands shaking as I recounted the story. They searched the building but found no trace of the man who had invaded my home. Weeks passed, but I never felt safe again. I moved out of my apartment, left my job, and cut off all contact with friends. The weight of what had happened hung over me like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the dangers lurking online. I stopped using the internet altogether, convinced that one wrong click could lead to another nightmare. I had unwittingly opened the door to a world of horror, and now I was paying the price. The fear consumed me, turning my life into a cautionary tale about the true horrors that can lurk in the shadows of the web. It was no longer just a rumor, it was my reality. And every time I thought about that fateful night, I realized the truth: sometimes, curiosity kills. I had always been the type to push boundaries, especially when it came to the internet. My friends joked that I had a penchant for the morbid and strange, but even I never imagined the depths of depravity I would encounter one fateful night. It started innocently enough. I was bored, scrolling through obscure forums and threads. Curiosity drew me to the dark web, a place shrouded in mystery and rumors. I had heard whispers about an underground auction site, one that offered unimaginable experiences for the highest bidder. I dismissed the talk as urban legend, until I stumbled across a link that led me straight to it. The site was a stark contrast to the digital world I was used to: black background, flashing neon green text, and an unsettling atmosphere. I could feel my heart racing as I browsed the listings, each more grotesque than the last. And then, I found it. A live-streamed auction with a countdown timer ticking ominously at the top of the page. I hesitated. What kind of people would participate in something like this? Yet, I felt an inexplicable pull to watch. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or perhaps I wanted to witness the unimaginable firsthand. The chat was filled with sickening enthusiasm, bidders eagerly typing their offers, discussing strategies, and taunting one another. I felt an electric thrill pulse through me, despite the dread pooling in my stomach. The stream began with an ominous countdown, and the camera focused on a dimly lit room. In the center was a chair, and tied to it was a young woman, eyes wide with terror. I wanted to look away, but something kept me glued to the screen. The host, a shadowy figure dressed in black, introduced the auction, his voice dripping with malice. "Welcome to the torture auction. Tonight you decide her fate. Let the bidding begin." The first round was for something relatively mild by their standards: waterboarding. I watched in horrified fascination as the highest bidder won, and the woman was subjected to the gruesome ordeal. My heart raced as I witnessed her panic, the way she thrashed against her restraints, desperately gasping for air. The chat erupted with applause and cheers, an audience reveling in the spectacle. As the rounds progressed, I realized the auctions were getting increasingly twisted. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, each method more barbaric than the last. A bidding war ensued over a method called the rack. I felt sick but couldn't tear myself away. I was entranced by the sheer horror, and it wasn't until the host announced the next round that I felt a deep chill run down my spine. "Now, the ultimate decision: who will be our next victim?" A list of names appeared on the screen. They were people who had been identified and tracked down, a display of their profiles and vulnerabilities. I felt a cold sweat forming. These were real individuals, and the viewers were actively participating in choosing who would suffer next. Suddenly, I received a private message through the chat, the words chilling me to the bone. "You could join the fun. We have your details. Let's see how far you're willing to go." Panic flooded through me. I felt my heartbeat thunder in my ears as I quickly closed the window, but the message lingered, chilling my blood. My curiosity had led me here, and now I was being pulled deeper into this nightmare. I realized this was no longer just a spectator sport. I was in danger. I ran to my laptop, frantically searching for information on the auction site. But every link led me back to the same dark abyss. My mind raced with thoughts of the woman I had just watched, trapped and tortured. My empathy mixed with horror. I had turned from a witness to a potential target. In the days that followed, I tried to erase the experience from my mind, but the images haunted me. I stayed off my computer, but every noise made me jump. I felt like I was being watched, a constant paranoia creeping into my daily life. One night, I received another message. It was the same sender, their words dripping with malice. "We know you're scared. But you can still be part of the show. Just let us know. The bidding starts now." I felt my breath quicken as I stared at the screen. They knew where I lived, my name, everything about me. It felt like a game I didn't want to play, yet I was already ensnared in their web. I immediately reported the account, hoping to sever this connection, but deep down, I knew I was still vulnerable. Days turned into weeks, and my paranoia only deepened. I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me bolt upright. I began to see shadows in the corners of my vision, and the walls felt like they were closing in. I avoided my phone, my laptop, any device that could connect me back to that hellish realm. Then one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a faint knock at my window. My heart stopped. I froze, not daring to move. The knocking grew more insistent, and fear flooded my body. My instincts screamed at me to run, to hide, but where could I go? I peeked through the curtains and saw nothing but darkness. But the feeling of being watched intensified, a weight pressing down on my chest. I held my breath, my heart pounding in rhythm with the incessant knocking. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted to the front door and locked it, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I decided to call the police, but the moment I picked up my phone, a message popped up. "You can't escape us." A cold wave of dread washed over me. It was time to take action. I deleted everything, social media accounts, my email, and anything that could lead them back to me. I changed my phone number and even moved to a different apartment, hoping to escape the grasp of the tormentors. But the truth was, I was forever marked by that night. I had danced with darkness and felt its cold touch. The horror I witnessed was not just on that screen, it seeped into my life. The fear remained, a constant reminder that the abyss of human depravity was only a click away. I had been a spectator in the most grotesque auction imaginable, and the price I paid was the loss of my peace. To this day, I live with the scars of that experience. I still look over my shoulder, still hear the echoes of that haunting auction in my mind. I learned that some curiosities are better left unexplored, that the dark web is a siren song, luring the unwary into a world where humanity's worst instincts reign supreme. And every now and then, when I hear a faint knock at the door, I remember, some games are never meant to be played. I've always been obsessed with appearance, scrolling through social media feeds filled with flawless faces and perfect bodies. It wasn't just a casual interest. It became an obsession that consumed my life. As I approached my 30s, the pressure to maintain my looks weighed heavily on me. After a particularly harsh comment from a colleague about my aging skin, I knew I had to do something drastic. That's when I came across an obscure online ad that caught my eye. "Achieve the perfect look. Private consultations available." I should have been suspicious. The website had a gritty aesthetic, like something straight out of a horror film. But desperation clouded my judgment, and I clicked through, enticed by the before and after photos that promised transformation beyond my wildest dreams. The clinic was located in a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. When I arrived, the area felt eerily quiet, as if I were the only one there. I hesitated for a moment, but then the door swung open, revealing a man with a genial smile. His lab coat was pristine, his eyes glinting with an unsettling enthusiasm. "Welcome! You must be here for the consultation," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. Inside, the waiting room was dimly lit, decorated with high-end fashion magazines. I was the only patient there, which I found strange but didn't question. The walls were adorned with disturbing artwork, grotesque depictions of beauty and pain intertwined. I felt a knot in my stomach, but my desire for perfection pushed me forward. After a short wait, I was ushered into an examination room. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Hargrove, an acclaimed plastic surgeon known for his radical techniques. He began explaining his philosophy. Beauty is a blend of art and science, and sometimes, to create the perfect masterpiece, sacrifices must be made. His words sent a chill down my spine, but I was too entranced by the possibility of transformation to heed the warning signs. He explained the procedure in intricate detail. It was unlike any surgery I had heard of, a method that involved taking skin grafts from other sources to enhance my appearance. "We have a unique supply chain that ensures only the best quality skin is used," he boasted. "You'll be amazed at how beautiful you'll look." I was swept away by the vision of myself as a flawless beauty, so I signed the consent forms without fully reading the fine print. Dr. Hargrove's excitement was contagious, and my fear faded beneath the promise of the perfect look. The operation was scheduled for the following week. When I arrived at the clinic, I was greeted by an assistant who led me to the operating room. As I lay on the table, anxiety kicked in. The sterile smell of antiseptic was overwhelming, and the reality of what I was about to undergo began to sink in. Dr. Hargrove entered, his demeanor calm and confident. I felt a rush of panic but quickly pushed it aside. I wanted this. As the anesthesia took effect, I heard the low hum of machinery and the rustle of surgical instruments. Just as I slipped into unconsciousness, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a covered figure on a nearby gurney. My heart raced as I lost consciousness, the last thought in my mind being one of dread. When I awoke, I was in a recovery room, groggy and disoriented. My body ached, and the sensation of tight bandages wrapped around my skin felt suffocating. Dr. Hargrove stood at the foot of my bed, his expression a mix of pride and satisfaction. "You did wonderfully! I can't wait for you to see the results," he said, a hint of mania in his voice. Days passed as I recovered, but something felt off. I noticed that the clinic staff was unusually evasive. They avoided my questions about the surgery, and the assistant who helped me seemed increasingly anxious. I overheard snippets of conversations about fresh stock and harvesting, which sent chills through my spine. One night, driven by a sense of dread, I snuck out of my recovery room and ventured down the dimly lit halls of the clinic. What I discovered would haunt me forever. I stumbled upon a locked door, and curiosity got the better of me. I managed to pry it open, only to be met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The room was filled with grotesque displays of human skin, organized in chillingly meticulous rows. The walls were lined with photos of past victims, people whose faces I recognized from the social media feeds that had fueled my obsession. My heart raced as I realized these were not just stories. They were real lives cut short to feed Dr. Hargrove's insatiable need for perfection. Panicking, I stumbled backward, my mind racing. I had unknowingly become part of something horrifying. The perfect look I sought came at an unimaginable cost, suffering and death. I turned to escape but was met by Dr. Hargrove, his face twisted into a manic grin. "You're not leaving, dear. You're one of my masterpieces now," he said, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. In that moment, I knew I had to fight for my life. I lunged past him, desperate to escape the clinic and the nightmare it harbored. I sprinted down the hallway, adrenaline fueling my every step, my heart pounding in my ears. As I reached the front door, I could hear his footsteps closing in behind me. Bursting into the cool night air, I ran blindly into the darkness, the weight of what I had witnessed bearing down on me. I didn't stop until I reached my car, shaking with fear and adrenaline. I drove away, leaving the clinic and Dr. Hargrove behind, but the horror would never truly leave me. I reported everything to the authorities, but the clinic had vanished. No one believed me. The dark web had allowed this man to operate in the shadows, leaving no trace behind. Now I live with the knowledge of what happens when obsession blinds you to reality. I see reminders of those I lost every time I scroll through social media, and I can't escape the haunting question: how many more lives are being sacrificed for the sake of beauty? The pursuit of perfection had turned into my worst nightmare, and the scars, both visible and invisible, will forever remind me of the horror I escaped but can never forget.